I have often heard it suggested that you should get a shotgun for your very first firearm. And I disagree with that. In fact, in other videos, I've talked about my suggestion for a first gun to new gun owners. The very first gun I would buy, if I had to start over, let's say I'm either a brand new gun owner and I haven't bought anything yet, or maybe I lost everything in a house fire and I have to restart the collection, right? The very first gun I would buy is going to be a handgun. I've never explained or described why it shouldn't be a shotgun. So in this video, I'm going to give you the #1 reason for why you should not buy a shotgun as your first gun. And guess what? My first gun was a shotgun. So this is from personal experience and me just trying to help those who might not know better because they're listening to people tell them that a shotgun is great, which in fact it is. It's very versatile, it's very utilitarian, it can do a lot of things very well. But there's one thing you can't do with a shotgun very well in most circumstances that's very important to actually being able to use it to defend yourself with. And what's that one thing? Well, I'll tell you, it's training. Training on a shotgun is extremely difficult. Not only is it expensive because the ammunition itself is not very cheap, especially if you're using proper training loads in order to understand the level of recoil you'll be dealing with during a defensive situation. But the other thing to consider is that there's not many places to go when it comes to being able to train properly with a shotgun. Now, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Of course, thanks to them, all kinds of shotgun stuff is available to the masses. And I appreciate what they do when it comes to supporting the preparedness community. So big thanks to Midway USA. But here's the thing. As someone who was a first-time gun owner from purchasing a 12-gauge shotgun, I quickly found out that at my local range, I couldn't do very much with that shotgun unless it was trap or skeet. Now, trap and skeet is fun, and it definitely teaches a lot of good skills in the sense of getting familiar with the platform and being accurate and shooting targets on the move, and it has some very good benefits to it. But that's not defensive shooting. That's not home defense. That's not self-defense. That's simulated hunting, for lack of a better term, which is fine. But we're talking about people who want to buy a gun because they're worried about defending themselves, they're worried about their safety, and they want to make sure they can protect their lives and the lives of the people they love. Those people need to be able to go somewhere and actually train with the weapon that they choose, and they need to become proficient with it. And that's very hard to do with a shotgun compared to a handgun, which is generally what I suggest for a multitude of reasons, which I've talked about in other videos. But I've never specifically addressed why a shotgun isn't a great idea for that purpose. And in fact, a rifle is even easier to train with than a shotgun. Most indoor ranges have very limiting rules when it comes to shooting a 12 or 20 gauge shotgun at their range. And for some people, they only have access to an indoor range. And even if those people had access to private property or BLM land or anything else like that, how would they know what to do in the sense of training with their shotgun? So they bought what's one of the more affordable pieces of equipment that works well, like a pump shotgun. And now the expectation is that they're going to spend $1,000 to take a training class on how to use a defensive shotgun. The likelihood of that is very low. Those people are just wanting to be safe and wanting to be able to defend themselves, but maybe not necessarily planning on becoming a shooter per se. And that's understandable. But you still need to have familiarity of your weapon. And with a handgun or a rifle, loading the weapon, reloading the weapon, aiming down the sights, putting rounds on target, all of those things are relatively easy to learn, right? They might not be easy at first, but they are things that are easy to learn and easy to teach. But all those things, when we're talking about a shotgun, are a lot more difficult. Every aspect of it. First off, well, this particular shotgun, it only has a 5-round magazine tube. Sure, can it be extended to 8? Yes. So with an 8-round magazine tube, I'm still at half the capacity of most double-stack handguns, and I'm also at a third or even a quarter of the capacity of a lot of rifles. I have way less shots, and then when I need to reload, because I want to learn how to use my weapon properly and I have to anticipate that I may need to reload, my options are very limited on what's available to me in the sense of making that reload process more efficient, and practicing those reloads is much more difficult than just inserting a magazine into a magazine well. Loading shells into a shotgun under duress requires training. It's not easy. It's not something that people can just do intuitively. Loading a magazine into a pistol grip well is a lot easier. It just is. And going to the range and shooting a pistol is a lot more accessible. Most indoor ranges allow pistols, some allow rifles, but very few allow shotguns, and even if they do, they only allow a certain type of load and a certain type of shooting style. You're not going there to really learn how to do anything other than maybe feel the recoil of the gun and understand how the mechanics of it work in the sense of turning off the safety and pulling the trigger, right, and loading the action. But in all reality, you're not gaining any training benefits from that. Plus, these things could be overcome regarding dry fire, but the same thing applies to rifles and pistols too, and then those rifles and pistols are easier to get out and actually train with based on most people's restrictions. And I'm not saying you can't get good with a shotgun, but even when you become the best shotgunner out there, in many cases, you're still going to be outclassed by a guy with an AR-15, right? And in a lot of cases, or actually just about every single case, you still have less capacity than a guy with a standard pistol. Even a 1911 generally can carry more rounds in it than your typical defensive shotgun, even with an extended magazine tube. So that's why I don't suggest a shotgun for someone's first gun. It really limits their capacity to be able to train on it. It really limits their capacity to get comfortable with. It's not very mobile in the sense of being able to take it with you. It's a pretty large platform. I mean, this has the minimum barrel length that a lot of shotguns are required to stick to at 18.5 inches, right? This is not a small gun. And then we're suggesting that what? A tiny little lady who lives down the street, buys this for their first gun and then never ever gets to shoot it or take it anywhere that allows them to shoot it to learn properly on. And we're expecting them to be effective with that in the middle of the night all of a sudden for the very first time they've ever pulled the trigger. Like, that's just not very realistic, is it? So look, I have nothing against shotguns. I don't want anyone to misconstrue this video as Magic Prepper hates shotguns. I don't. Obviously, they're good. They have a lot of excellent applications. You'll never find me without a 12-gauge shotgun. It is the most practical firearm I own. And in fact, I'll be completely honest with you, it's the only firearm I own that has actually been successful on a hunting trip. So, right? They're great. Shotguns are great. They're excellent. But because of the restrictions that are placed upon the people here in the United States when it comes to what they can or can't do with their firearms, and it's someone who's brand new to the game that might not be comfortable just driving out to the woods and setting up targets and running drills, right? And all the things related to trying to get better as a shooter, we have to think about it in the parameters of what would the average person have access to and how good could they actually get on a shotgun realistically based on that access. And going to the indoor range and shooting static targets with a handgun is not super beneficial, but I still guarantee you'll get more out of that than you will shooting light bird shot at the same target at that indoor range without any level of, well, anything. It's basically pointless. So that was my experience as a guy whose first gun was a shotgun. I couldn't take it anywhere and actually do any real shooting that was worth anything. And the only way that would have benefited me is if I would have taken a class, right? Which everyone should take a class. But taking a pistol class at an indoor range is a lot more feasible and a lot more accessible than taking a shotgun class at Thunder Ranch for most people, right? So I just wanted to bring that up. That's why I don't suggest shotguns for your first firearm. It's the #1 reason, training, right? And let's not forget, buckshot right now, it's like $1 a round, right? This is not inexpensive ammo either. Sure, you can train with target loads and everything else. That's great, especially just for reloading and learning all the processes and the mechanics. But that doesn't actually simulate a defensive round if you're going to use it in that capacity. And suddenly, all that training you did was really good and you got really good at it, and now we're introducing really thick recoil. And that's a little different. That hits a little different now, doesn't it? So, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I know a lot of people suggest shotguns for their first gun. I understand why. It's why I bought one for my first gun, because that's what I was suggested as well. But man, was it hard to get out and actually shoot it. And I don't mean just trap and skeet. I mean, go to a range and actually be able to shoot it, reload it, transition between targets, any of those things. That's already hard to find when it comes to rifles and pistols, but even harder with shotguns, or at least that was my experience. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you guys want to support the channel, go to magicprepper.com. There's all kinds of discount codes and stuff over there. You might find something that you'd be interested in. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.